In 1967, a UCLA student who was 7 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 225 pounds walked into a martial arts class and started training under a man who was 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 150 pounds. The student was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The teacher was Bruce Lee. 4 years later, Bruce Lee called Kareem and asked him to fly to Hong Kong for a 5-day film shoot. He needed someone to play the most dangerous opponent his character would ever face, the guardian of the highest level of a pagoda, a practitioner whose physical size made conventional martial arts tactics useless. Kareem accepted. He flew to Hong Kong. What they filmed in those 5 days became, by the consistent assessment of martial arts film critics across 50 years, the most technically sophisticated fight sequence in the history of the genre. And none of it would have existed if a UCLA basketball player had not walked into a martial arts class in 1967 because a friend told him it might be interesting. This is the story of the friendship between Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bruce Lee, what began it, what it produced, and what Kareem has said it gave him across a 20-season NBA career. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, born Lou Alcindor in New York City on April 16, 1947, arrived at UCLA in 1965 as the most heavily recruited college basketball player of his generation. He was 7 feet 2 inches tall, had a wingspan that exceeded most players his size, and possessed a combination of coordination and basketball intelligence that coaches of the era described with the careful language of people trying to be objective about something unprecedented. He was already, at 19, carrying the weight that would define his public life for the next 6 decades, the expectations of a sport, the specific exposure of someone whose physical distinctiveness made ordinary anonymity impossible, and the early stirrings of the political consciousness that would eventually make him one of the more complex and thoughtful public figures in American sports history. He had already converted to Islam in 1971 and changed his name from Lou Alcindor to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a decision that cost him commercial endorsements and public goodwill in ways that he had accepted as the price of living according to his own convictions. He took up martial arts while at UCLA in the mid-1960s because a friend recommended it and because the specific combination of physical discipline, mental focus, and practical application that martial arts required appealed to him in ways that the structured rituals of basketball practice did not fully satisfy. He was looking for something that engaged the mind alongside the body, the philosophical dimension of physical training that he would eventually find in Bruce Lee's teaching and then extend, through years of further study, into a yoga practice that he maintained for the rest of his athletic career. He tried several instructors before a mutual friend introduced him to Bruce Lee. Kareem described their first meeting in his memoir, Becoming Kareem, with the specific detail of someone who remembers the moment accurately because it mattered. Bruce was the kind of person who could win you over within 20 seconds of meeting him. Most martial arts instructors I had met before were very stiff and formal, constantly demanding overt demonstrations of respect. Not Bruce. He greeted me with a broad smile and friendly demeanor, and right away I knew this was not a scowling teacher from Japanese films demanding bowing obedience. We talked UCLA basketball for a while, and then got down to business. The business was Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee was by 1967 in the middle of the most intensive period of development of the system he had been building since the Wong Jackman fight in Oakland in 1964. He had been training private students, Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Joe Louis, Mike Stone, and others, and refining the principles through those training relationships. Kareem was a different kind of student in one specific and immediately relevant way. He was 7 feet 2 inches tall, with arms proportionally longer than that height would suggest. The problem of fighting someone with Kareem's reach was not a problem that Wing Chun or most other traditional systems had been designed to address. It was, for Bruce, a genuine and interesting technical challenge.
They trained together for 4 years, from 1967 until Bruce relocated to Hong Kong in 1971 to make The Big Boss. The training relationship produced a genuine friendship, two men who recognized in each other specific qualities that were rare. Kareem was, by the accounts of people who knew him, one of the more intellectually serious people in professional basketball at a time when intellectual seriousness was not especially celebrated in that environment. He was interested in philosophy, in history, in the relationship between physical discipline and mental clarity. These were exactly the things Bruce Lee was also interested in, and the combination produced a relationship that was not limited to the technical content of the training sessions. They talked, they argued, they agreed on some things and disagreed on others. They formed the specific bond that is available to two people of exceptional and different gifts who recognize, across those differences, a common seriousness. Kareem has credited the training he received from Bruce Lee with a specific and concrete consequence: his durability. He played 20 seasons in the NBA from 1969 to 1989. He reached the playoffs in 18 of those 20 seasons. He appeared in 6 NBA Finals championships, winning 5 of them. He was named Most Valuable Player 6 times, a record. He was, until LeBron James surpassed him in 2023, the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, with 38,387 points. He played until he was 42 years old. In an appearance on SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt in 2020, Kareem described specifically what Bruce had given him that contributed to this durability. Bruce always emphasized the effectiveness of stretching, he said. So before we worked out, we stretched all the time, and that was it. I took that to another level by studying yoga and being able to advance as a yoga student, and that really was the best preventative maintenance that I could have been doing in the off-season. He described the training as the foundation of a physical maintenance practice that he built on over 2 decades of professional sport. The correlation between 4 years of training with Bruce Lee and 20 seasons of durability in one of the most physically demanding professional sports in the world is not something that can be proved with the kind of rigor that science requires, but Kareem has stated it directly, repeatedly, across 50 years of being asked, and he is in a position to know. When Bruce began production on Game of Death in August 1972, he was designing the most philosophically ambitious film of his career. The pagoda structure, 5 levels, each guarded by a practitioner of a different martial arts system, was not simply an action movie scaffold. It was a demonstration of the core argument of Jeet Kune Do, that no single system is sufficient, that the trained martial artist must be able to adapt to whatever system the opponent brings, and that the highest form of martial arts is the one that has absorbed everything and retained nothing fixed. Each fight was an argument. The first level was Dan Inosanto with the nunchaku, Filipino martial arts, weapon-based, requiring the character to adapt to a range and tempo that his system did not primarily use. The second level was Ji Han Jae with Hapkido, Korean joint locks and throws, a grappling-based system that required a completely different approach. Each level escalated. Each opponent presented a new problem requiring a new solution. For the highest level, the most formidable opponent, the guardian of the peak, Bruce needed someone who presented a problem that no conventional solution could address, a man whose reach made every conventional fighting distance dangerous. He needed, in other words, the problem that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had presented in 4 years of private training sessions, and which Bruce had spent those 4 years developing a specific answer to. He called Kareem. He explained the role. Hakim, the final guardian, a practitioner whose reach and size made him nearly impossible to fight at conventional distances. The fight sequence would demonstrate the ultimate application of JKD principles, finding and exploiting the specific weakness in a physical advantage so overwhelming that most practitioners would have no answer for it. Kareem's weakness in the specific technical analysis that Bruce had developed through their training was the low line, the legs, the structure that supported all of that size and reach. Attack below the reach, and the reach becomes irrelevant. This was not a general principle. It was a specific solution developed through years of actually solving the specific problem of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem agreed. He flew to Hong Kong. He spent 5 days on set filming the sequence that would become the most discussed fight in Game of Death and one of the most discussed in the history of martial arts cinema. In the sequence, Bruce's character faces Kareem's character, the size differential immediately visible and immediately overwhelming to watch, the 7'2" guardian occupying the pagoda's upper level with the specific authority of someone who has never been successfully challenged in this space. Bruce's character circles, tests, probes. Kareem's character responds with the reach and the physical dominance of someone who has won every fight in this space by simply being what he is. Then the low attack, the legs, the structure, the foundation, the physical advantage collapses from the bottom up. The sequence is, by the assessment of everyone who has written seriously about it, both a fight scene and a lecture. The content of the lecture is the argument of Jeet Kune Do. Physical advantage is real, but not absolute. Every system has a weakness. The highest martial art is the one that finds the weakness and attacks it without sentimentality. Bruce Lee designed the sequence and performed it with Kareem from a position of unique knowledge. He had trained with this man for 4 years. He knew exactly what Kareem's reach and size felt like from inside the problem, and he had developed the specific solution through those 4 years of actually working on it. Kareem later reflected on what the fight had taught him about Bruce Lee specifically. That there are some very tough guys at 155 pounds, he said, with the specific dry humor of a man who has spent 50 years being asked about this. But Bruce learned that it's hard fighting somebody with long arms. Then, more seriously, what you learn is you can't have a preconceived idea of what is ideal for you as a martial artist. You have to go and experience some of the different martial arts and take from them what you can that works for you personally. I think that is the way people train now. The ultimate fighting really is how Bruce trained, very eclectically, taking techniques and ideas from any of the different martial arts and using them.
He recognized, in other words, that Bruce Lee had been practicing mixed martial arts in 1967, more than 2 decades before the UFC was founded and the term entered common use. This is the same observation that Dana White, the president of the UFC, has made publicly and repeatedly. The sport that the UFC built around the principle of taking what works from every martial art and discarding what doesn't is the sport that Bruce Lee was developing in private sessions in Los Angeles and Hong Kong in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Kareem was one of the people in those sessions. He watched it from inside the room. Bruce Lee died on July 20th, 1973. The 5 days of Game of Death footage that he and Kareem had filmed were among the last and most complete creative work he left behind. The 1978 version of Game of Death, which used Bruce's original footage as the climax of a new and largely unrelated film, was widely criticized. But the original footage itself, eventually released in documentary form as Bruce Lee: A Warrior's Journey in 2000, received a very different assessment. The fight between Bruce and Kareem is, in that footage, precisely what Bruce intended it to be, both the most physically spectacular thing in the film and the clearest demonstration of the philosophical argument the film was making. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went on to become the greatest center in the history of the NBA and one of the most decorated athletes of the 20th century. He retired in 1989 at the age of 42, having played 20 seasons, a career length that is itself remarkable in a sport that destroys most bodies before their mid-30s. He won 5 NBA championships, was named Most Valuable Player 6 times, a record that still stands, and scored 38,387 points over his career, the all-time record until LeBron James surpassed it in 2023. He played in the NBA Finals 10 times. He developed his signature skyhook, an arcing hook shot launched from high above defenders' reach, into what many consider the most unguardable scoring move in the history of the game. He has said directly and specifically that the training he received from Bruce Lee was a meaningful contributor to the physical condition that allowed him to do all of this for as long as he did. The stretching protocols Bruce emphasized, the yoga practice that Kareem built on that foundation, the physical self-awareness that 4 years of martial arts training develops, the ability to understand what the body is doing and to maintain it with precision rather than simply pushing through. A 7'2" man who played elite basketball from age 22 to 42 and credited his longevity in part to 4 years of martial arts instruction from a man who was 5'7" and died at 32. The numbers involved in this relationship are the most extreme in any student-teacher dynamic in this story. 7'2" and 5'7", 225 pounds and 150 pounds, 20 NBA seasons and 32 years of life. The imbalances run in every direction. What ran in only one direction, consistently and across decades, was Kareem's gratitude and respect for the teacher who greeted him with a broad smile and talked UCLA basketball before getting down to business, and who had figured out, in 4 years of working with the most unusual training partner he had ever encountered, exactly how to defeat him. If this story moved you, subscribe and leave a comment. Did you know Kareem Abdul-Jabbar trained with Bruce Lee for 4 years and credited that training with his 20-season NBA durability? Share this video and tell us in the comments, is the Bruce Lee versus Kareem fight in Game of Death the most philosophically interesting fight scene ever filmed?